This episode of The Important Part was recorded on February 27th, 2025.
This podcast is sponsored by SoFi to help you get your money right and is for informational purposes only. Nothing in this program is a recommendation from SoFi to you or any listener. You should not rely on this program for any financial advice or legal or tax advice. The views expressed do not necessarily reflect the institutional views of SoFi or its affiliates.
This is The Important Part. I'm Liz Thomas, Head of Investment Strategy at SoFi. 50 years ago, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act was signed into law. The law bans lenders from discriminating against borrowers based on their race, sex, religion, age, national origin, source of income, and marital status. The Equal Credit Opportunity Act was a milestone, but there's still plenty of financial inequality in the United States today. Financial literacy isn't just about fairness, it's also about power. Understanding money from a younger age can help the next generation be better at investing, saving, and building wealth. To celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, SoFi created the SoFi Give Her Credit program. We awarded $500,000 across 50 projects supporting women's financial independence. In this episode, we're talking to two of those winners who are changing lives and changing the way markets work. Courtney Pettway is CEO of KidVestors, an award-winning financial education platform that makes learning about money fun and accessible for kids. Courtney is joining us here in the studio. And Ashley Leftwich is CEO of Rock the Street, Wall Street, a nonprofit that introduces high school girls to finance and investing fundamentals. Ashley's joining us remotely from Tennessee. Welcome, ladies, to The Important Part. All right, welcome, both of you. And congratulations again as being two of the winners of our program. I was part of the launching of that program, and I had such a wonderful time doing it. I'm so excited to meet both of you and talk about the different causes that you are a part of. I think they're both amazing. So, Courtney, I'm going to start with you. KidVestors is the name of the organization. What was the light bulb moment, or what was the moment where you realized kids needed more help with financial literacy? They needed to be brought into the conversation, or that this was a gap that existed out there?
Yes. So my background is in real estate. So we started investing in real estate, myself and my husband, who's also my co-founder, several years ago. And so we would start investing, and in the communities that we were actually investing in, we would host free workshops. And so one day after one of those workshops, we were kind of complaining about essentially not knowing about this information growing up. Why didn't anyone teach us just the basics, let alone investing? And so that was really the light bulb moment. But really what even stuck the most is I was watching TV, and an analyst had talked about the racial wealth gap, and particularly how African Americans, if trends continue, that gap would grow to, or actually fall to zero by 2053. And so that was it was a light bulb moment for me. Like, oh, something needs to change. And
because 2053 is too far off.
Exactly. And there's a lot of reasons for that wealth gap. We would be here all day. And I'm not even going to say financial literacy is the sole solution, but it is definitely part of that conversation. And we want to make sure that everyone has equal access to this information. And so we wanted to do something about it. And so that's how KidVestors was born.
And what age do you typically target for them to get started? Because I think there's a school of thought out there where people would say, let kids be kids, right? Don't hit them over the head with this super serious stuff really early. Just let them be kids. Let them have their childhood. So is there a good age? And I suppose you have to kind of keep it kid-friendly,
Correct.
Right? You can't sit a 6-year-old down in a classroom and say, today we're going to learn about
ETFs.
economics. Yeah, right. You'd lose attention pretty quickly. So what's the right age, and how do you keep them engaged in it at certain ages?
Yeah, so research actually shows that kids can actually start understanding money at around 3, and their habits actually start forming at around 7. So we actually start around that 7 to 8 year age. But we make it fun. So we don't teach where it goes over their heads, because that also can lose them and does not keep them engaged to want to learn more. And so that's the age we start. And we found that we have the most engagement around that age.
Okay. And you're a mother.
Yes.
You've got, your oldest is 5. We were
5,
talking
4,
before
and
this.
16 months.
5, 4, and 6. She is brave, everybody.
And crazy.
She is very brave and crazy. Yeah, maybe a little brave with a side of crazy.
Crazy.
So do you teach your own kids about this? Do you do this? You do this to that? You put them through the ringer of it?
Well,
Okay.
right now, so like my 4-year-old, she's learning about what is money. How much is a dime worth? How much is a penny? It's just planting those seeds so they can start getting familiar. So, and I'm also setting the foundation to be comfortable having those conversations. So right now, extremely elementary.
Yeah.
But as they get older, we're going to learn like, okay, hey, how much is this? You're going to start putting aside money, to save for things you want. So it just starts small like that. And then we'll continue to progress as they get older, of course.
I probably need some lessons from you. I've got a 7-year-old stepson, and there was a recent conversation. I think he was asking about how credit cards worked, and I went like straight into finance mode. Like, so well, sit down. We're going to talk about what bad debt means, and he, right over his head. So I need a little counseling on how to have those conversations better. So how do you make it fun though? Right? I mean, there's a lot of different schools of thought, and this is without us getting into parenting techniques, but do you make it games out of it? Do you believe in them getting money for doing chores? I mean, how do you keep it fun so that it's lasting and that there's a positive relationship with it? Because I think that's probably the most important part.
Yeah. So for KidVestors, it is gamified. So they're playing games that revolve around money. And on top of that, we incentivize them with real cash. So as they're hitting these milestones, we're rewarding them with real money that they can put into practice what they're learning. And then as far as the method and how we teach, especially for our younger students, we use animation. And so we do a lot of storytelling and dialogue versus someone just talking at you. We're explaining it in a way that they're understanding. So we essentially have many TV episodes that are engaging, but it's surrounding money, investing, entrepreneurship. So you have to speak to them in their language. And if you're just talking at them, they're going to tune out. And so that's the approach that we take. And we found that, people love it. Parents love it. Kids love it. Teachers love it.
Yeah. What happens if it doesn't happen? What happens? What are the bad habits? What are the drawbacks of kids not getting this? I mean, I think most of us didn't get that kind of education when we were younger in our generation. And even some of the younger generations, there isn't that kind of coursework. You don't have that as a class in school. You have to choose it as a class in school. And even if you choose it, it's not happening until late high school or college. So what do you see as the biggest things that stand in the way when kids don't have this kind of education?
Well, I can speak from personal experience. As soon as I graduated high school, getting into credit card debt because I don't really understand how they work, maybe getting too much student loans that I didn't really need. And so now, I'm spending refund checks on spring break because I didn't really understand how they work. I even see it in older adults not being able to retire. And there's a lot of factors in, reasons why someone could, not be comfortable with approaching retirement. But it's also because a lot of them didn't know how or didn't know where to start. And I think if we had that information as early as possible, think about how much debt could be avoided. Think how much more we would be prepared for retirement. I could go on and on about the positive benefits of having this information at your disposal a lot earlier. And so I think it's a huge benefit to start as early as possible.
There's so many people out there with debt, and you can end up feeling so crippled by it. And then it confuses your goals. And we talked about this on a recent episode as well, where if you've got all this different stuff that's calling your attention, you have to pay off a credit card, you have to pay off student loans, you want to save for an emergency fund, you've got all these different priorities, your brain gets overwhelmed. And then you end up not doing any of them. Mm-hmm. You end up just sort of frozen. And I think it takes that systematic approach to looking at it and saying, okay, number one, I need to tackle this first. I need to do this next. But you need the education to understand what is the biggest priority. What's the top priority to tackle first? And can the other 3 priorities wait until that one is done? And I think the answer to that oftentimes is yes, because they have to. And you have to free yourself from that crippling
Right.
weight of, oh my gosh, I don't know how to get out of this hole. So and the first priority is really to not get into the hole in the first place. But, sometimes that's unavoidable.
Life happens. Mm-hmm.
So if you're a parent and you don't have this program necessarily right at your fingertips today, what are ways that parents can start this conversation with their kids, knowing that when it's a parent talking to their child, it's a different dynamic and they're less inclined to listen. The same way that, when your parent is trying to teach you math versus you're going to school to learn math, it's harder. It's harder to get that message through. So what do you tell parents about how to have this conversation with their kids?
Teaching them the value of money early. So, money does not grow on trees.
Mm-hmm.
So that means maybe saying no a little more. No, we cannot get this because you have not saved for it. Or, you have $50 this week for allowance. No, I'm not buying you this $60 what have you, because you don't have enough. So even having those conversations as early as possible so they have a healthy relationship with money. And so that, like I said, involves saying no a lot more. And then also, I always say model what you want mimicked. You also need to have these conversations when you're sitting down with your partner and you're, designing your budget. Bring your child along, let them be a part of that conversation within reason. You don't have to disclose everything, but just also getting them in the habit of seeing, oh, mom and dad are budgeting or mom and dad are talking about money or whatever. And so just modeling what you want to see from your child. And that goes with anything, but it also applies to finances.
Do you think, this is a question that I've had personally for a long time. I grew up in the Midwest. I moved to New York when I was in my early 30s. I found that people in New York talk about money a lot more than people in Wisconsin talk about money.
And Kentucky.
Yeah. So there are like huge swaths of the country. And Ashley, I'd be interested in your feedback on this too when we talk about Rock the Street. But there are really different attitudes across the country where in some areas it's comfortable and kids are going to grow up in an environment where everybody's talking about money. And that's not even always healthy because you can talk about money in an unhealthy way and breed values that are probably not as constructive. But what do you do about those regional differences?
Mm-hmm. I definitely understand that. And that is one of our mission at KidVestors is financial inclusion for all. And I would argue it's not even just geographic, but especially for underserved communities, we're not having those conversations a lot because we don't even understand how to. And so there was a stat that I even came across that in student populations where majority are eligible for free or reduced lunch, only 1 in 20 even have access to that information. So you're not going to have those conversations if you don't even have access to the information to hold those conversations. And so that is a big part of it, especially in more rural communities. They're not having those conversations because there's possibly less exposure. And so that's also one of our aims is to expose more underserved populations to this information so we can start having more conversations about it. And so it's normalized.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably the right way to do it. You have to get it out there, make it more natural, make it more common.
Correct.
and then it gets more comfortable. But there's a long way to go,
yes.
Especially in certain parts of the country. Okay, let's shift over to Rock the Street, Wall Street with Ashley. So let's start with what's the problem? What's the gap that Rock the Street, Wall Street is working to solve? And why do you think it existed even in the first place?
Yes. So thank you so much, Liz. Rock the Street, Wall Street is really helping high school girls and young women navigate the world of finance. So what that looks like is we absolutely agree that investing needs to be accessible. It needs to be engaging and relative to the particular individuals that are learning these concepts. It's so important that we have that early introduction, the conversation around compounding, both how it can be beneficial and detrimental to the point of our conversation, right? The value of money, and then also the power of investing. I mean, that all can be very transformational. So how we like to say at Rock the Street, Wall Street, we're bringing the M in STEM, meaning science, technology, engineering, and math to life. So we do that through project-based learning, and also continue to help them from classrooms to careers. So providing industry access and that connection into the industry and what these jobs even look like. Just based on we have over 60 high schools that are across the US and in Canada and in London. And for all of those, whether it be Main Street or Wall Street, to the geographic point, there's a different level of conversation that happens with money. So the main problem that we've kind of talked about, there's many that are societal based, but lack of female role models is certainly part of it for what we see and what research shows. We're actually losing girls in math by the age of 9. Some would say as early as age 6, according to research. And so girls are on par with the boys through math classes, and then they start to wane and drop out of that and drop their interest in math. And so regaining that interest is really critical in order to see a change. And of course, we're at a very pivotal time in a generational wealth transfer as well.
So you're targeting high school and a little bit of college too, right? Do I have that right? Okay. So
yes.
What is the sweet spot about that age group? Because you just mentioned we start to lose girls around age 9 in math. So then it seems to me that there's a gap, right? So we've got age 9 until, let's call it 13, 14, when they start high school. What happens between that time? And then when they get to high school, how do we get them back and engaged in it?
Right. So in high school, the reason why we're focused on that time is it's such a pivotal time. They're starting to understand money differently than before. It's more than they see goals that they have for their own self as far as spending money, what money is spent on, how they earn money. They're getting their first jobs. They're deciding what they may major in college. So that high school age is really pivotal for that introduction in what we've seen. We see that there's a great importance. The actually top 2 reasons why we don't see women pursuing the field of finance as a career is because they don't see women in the profession and they don't see their girlfriends choosing that profession. So during that high school time, they really have an opportunity to participate in it with their friends and be able to have those role models come in and still have the understanding of what it's like in a corporate setting. Many times it's their first introduction to that through our program. But that is why we are focused at the high school age.
And how do you, I think that's great, first of all. And I will say, I've been in finance my whole career. I come from a very big family, and I was the first one to be in this industry. And that's not just a family of women. There are a lot of women in the family, but I was definitely the first one to be in finance, and I've had a tremendous experience in this industry. So girls, it's okay. Get into it. It can be fun, I promise. So when you think about that age group and how to get them back and engaged, what are some of the things that stand in the way? Because I imagine there's probably a little bit of resistance in the beginning. What are the biggest things that you think stand in the way? And we know some of the stats, right? Women get started later. They invest less often. They're more risk averse. Why? Why is that happening?
There's many reasons to your point, but one of the ones that we're addressing is prioritizing as saving over investing, which is that investing piece is so crucial. Not only is it transformational, but one of the reasons that we see that is there's a lack of training, a lack of education, a lack of mentorship in that space, right? And so as we build the programming, introduce them, build that confidence level, we see that they are more likely to participate in the capital markets. They're more likely to see finance as a career. They're more likely to think of money in a different way. That's additive. And the more people we have participating in the capital markets, the better served communities are.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. If you had to compare, if you could put 2 girls side by side, one that had a female financial role model and one that did not have a female financial role model, what are the big differences that you found?
Oh, wow. So there are many differences. I mean, I can speak personally for my experience. I was the only woman in my college math class of 40. So seeing that there is not that representation there is big. So I can speak more to what we see in our students, which is we have a high school student, one of which that introduced savings and the idea of investing to their parent because they had no connection to that ahead of our programming. And what a difference that makes to understand that money differently and then take it a step further into investing. We have, even in New York, we have a student that actually had connection into the industry through the program. And what that looked like that was so different was she actually took the role of student CEO, which is like a club president for us. And so she's building her confidence, being in the environment within the club where she's actually leading those classroom sessions, had an opportunity to go into an internship and get invited back into an internship before she was thinking about journalism. And then she realized how much the industry and finance and the markets have to do with what's happening in the news. And that connection really made a difference as far as her trajectory. We are just delighted to see so many of our students also, of course, going into the industry and participating, but many will share that piece that was missing before is not seeing it modeled or not even knowing that finance was an opportunity. Mm-hmm. They see savings as an option, and they see that
because it's safe, right? It's like if you shove the money under the mattress, it's not going to go down, but it's also not going to go up.
And I see it, and it's there.
Right. I can see it. I can touch it. Right. Yes. And it feels safe, and it feels secure, and it is safe and secure. But then there's inflation that makes it less safe and secure, and there's the value of the dollar, but it takes education to understand that sort of thing. And then there's also what's called the opportunity cost of that, right? Putting your money under the mattress, taping it to the back of the toilet, wherever your safe place is, the opportunity cost is that it's not invested in something that can give it the chance to rise. And that's where you end up missing out and you end up behind. But okay, so now that we know more about both of the organizations, I want to have just an open discussion and we can just all kind of kick these questions around. How does financial literacy, or are there stats that show us financial literacy that begins earlier in somebody's life? Does it actually result in them having more money later? And I ask that, I'll give an example in finance. So this isn't about financial literacy. This is about another theme that's been around for quite a few years now, called socially responsible investing. And there were a lot of strategies that got put out that were socially responsible, or there was even ESG. So we've got environmental, social, and governance. And the idea was, okay, if companies are more socially responsible or environmentally sound, that's where the theme is headed. That's what investors want. So therefore, they should outperform. That hasn't really been the case. And in some spots it has happened, and others it hasn't. So although we understand and we're all standing behind, yes, we want to be friendlier to the environment. Yes, we want socially conscious companies. Yes, we want good governance. It hasn't unilaterally resulted in stronger performance necessarily of those companies, right? So I would ask the same sort of question here. Does financial literacy earlier in somebody's life actually result in them having more money later?
I would say there's not a guarantee, and I would also argue that I believe the way financial education has been presented has been kind of fragmented. And so that's why we at KidVestors takes a holistic approach. So you will have organizations who might just focus on budgeting, but budgeting is no good if you don't have the income to support it. Or they may only talk about investing, but then you've missed the fundamentals. Or they may only focus on, increasing your earning potential through sharpening your skills, but now you've missed the money management and the investing piece. It needs to be holistic. And I would argue we haven't had a lot of holistic financial literacy, so we can see those outcomes. So it all works together. You need to learn how to earn, but you need to know how to budget, but you also need to know how to grow it. And so I think if we had more holistic financial education, I do think we would see an increase of people who are financially thriving. But I feel like it has been kind of fragmented up until now.
I think that's very fair. Yeah. Yeah. Ashley, what are your thoughts?
I would say it also depends on who's teaching the financial literacy aspect and how confident they are, right? So, I mean, having financial professionals, it's wonderful to be able to have them teaching the content because they're the ones that are walking the walk, talking the talk, all of it. But really making sure that those that are presenting material, financial and investment literacy, are confident themselves whenever they're teaching that content. And then secondly, I love compounding, especially whenever it's positive compounding, right?
Right.
For you. So to the point of that earlier education and being able to have that knowledge, the earlier that it started, even whenever it's small, can really it could result in more for sure because of the compounding aspect and that investing aspect for the long game.
I'm wondering, because both of these programs are obviously optional, right? People aren't forced into them. I'm wondering about what if there was a way to force kids or force girls or force people into doing this? And I'm asking that because from personal experience, and I've told this story a number of times, even on other episodes of this podcast, when I was in college, I was working as a bank teller and my paychecks were like $80 every couple weeks because I was only working on weekends.
You were rich.
And I was rolling in it. And I had to buy Jimmy John subs. I wanted a Starbucks every once in a while. And then obviously I needed to buy beer at some point. So I needed like every penny of that $80. And my boss at the time, I became eligible for the 401k plan. And he just hounded me about enrolling in it and said, just put 6% away. You'll get the company match. You'll never miss it. I promise. And I was like, I will miss it. I need all the money, right? And I fought with him on it. And then eventually I just sort of gave in. He said, I promise you'll forget all about it. And he was right. I forgot all about it. And I stayed at that job for another couple years. I don't remember how long it was. I eventually, worked a full summer. So I put probably more in the 401k. Anyway, I completely forgot it existed. And when I left that job, I got a letter that said, where would you like to roll over your assets to? And I had like $1,200 in a 401k. And I couldn't believe there was a comma in the balance. Right? And I was like, an account I totally forgot existed. So that was a good experience for me. I wasn't necessarily forced, right? But he was aggressive enough about it that I eventually did it just to get him to leave me alone. And I wonder are we being aggressive enough with kids? And are we being aggressive enough with the groups that get left behind? Because if there is a little bit more of a nudge, even if they resist it, I can't imagine that there's a negative outcome, right? And Ashley, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. The more that we know, the more we get to move forward in it. And I don't think that there is a negative outcome in introducing it. There are different pieces, whether it be through government programs or what have you, where there might be an option for you to be in a financial literacy, or you're in a place where Courtney and I have programming where you can participate in that. But that they are self-selecting into the program, to your point. So like having something that is part of a core curriculum, if it's taught in a way that is positive, I think is the other side of that. Making sure that whenever the concept is introduced, it's something that is in a confidence building type of way.
And at least you rolled yours over because I spent all of mine.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes.
You learn from your mistakes.
I didn't know at the time, so I can't even tell you what I spent it on. Didn't know the penalties either.
Yeah, and I mean, yes, you're right. I did roll it over. And the other thing about that is that, so we had different experiences. I rolled it over, and then there was money there. I had started it. And then I wanted to keep going because I had the momentum. You stopped your momentum.
Because I didn't have the knowledge.
Right, exactly. Okay. Well, and I mean, I guess I did. I was a finance major. Maybe I had more knowledge, and I was a bank teller. So I was around money more than you were at the time. But the only point I'm trying to make is that once it started, I didn't stop because it was like the ball was rolling. The habit was in place. I was in my early 20s, so maybe a little later than you would have preferred, Ashley. Apologies. But still, it was early enough that then I thought, look at that. I have money, right? And
which is why I'm glad, to your point, thankfully, you said, wish there was a way to force. So over half of states are finally now requiring students to take a financial education course. Finally. And so now they don't have the option, but there is still a lot of room to grow, because what I've noticed is that even the standards that they're using to make sure grades are learning certain aspects are still very, very basic, barely even touch on investing. So it's about those core, fundamentals, budgeting, taxes, credit, insurance, et cetera, which are all great, all important. But again, when you have inflation, the dollar is not worth the same. I mean, I feel it 3 days. I have 3 kids, and every time I go to the grocery store, I feel it. And so we have to start teaching our kids the importance of compound interest, that growth of making the money work for you. And so I'm glad, they're making it a requirement. It's a start, but there's still a long way to go. I would love to see financial education be treated with the same level of importance as other core subjects, your math, your science, your English, your history, because a lot of the advanced courses that students take as they get older benefit those who are pursuing advanced degrees. But everyone, whether you're a teacher, whether you're in finance, whether you're a doctor, whether you're in the janitorial industry, everyone is impacted by money. So why is it that we're spending time dissecting frogs and learning about the Pythagorean theorem, which has its place, but kids don't know how to manage money? And so I'm glad to see that there is movement, but we have a long way to go.
It's very real, right? It's the relevance of it. So whenever you can see how money impacts your community, how it helps you, build bridges and service hospitals, and any opportunity, you seeing a comma in your 401k made it really tangible, very real. And so I think any opportunity to make it relevant is key.
Yeah. So Ashley, this one is for you. I'm wondering how, number one, how does the confidence gap grow between females and males? Because I think what we've established, at least in this conversation, is that there's a financial literacy problem no matter what the gender, right? There's a financial literacy problem below a certain age group, and that doesn't discriminate against any certain gender. So if we're not providing it to young men, we're also not providing it to young women, but somehow there is a big confidence gap between women and men as they get older. First part of the question is, why do you think that is? Second part is, how do we close it? This has been the unanswerable question for what feels like decades. I know my entire career, it's been the unanswerable question. Why is it happening? How do we close it? There have been a number of companies that have been set up to try to close it. I don't think anybody's gotten it right yet. What are we missing?
It's really a cultural issue, not a capability issue. So it's something that we really just see in Western culture, where the girls are not building the same confidence. And that there's something called math anxiety that the teacher has whenever they go to the whiteboard that transfers onto the girls in the classroom, but not the boys in the classroom. I mean, it's fascinating how there's just such this disparity that continues to make the gender confidence gap even larger. So the opportunities within it are really making, kind of to the point where we've talked about here today, having confidence, having women that are encouraging and also feel that they know the content in order to share that confidence on to the girls. In addition to math anxiety, we see the conversations at home and the conversations that happen with the boys versus with the girls about money. If you have those that are wealth advisors, who is coming to those conversations with the wealth advisor? Do we see the women coming to the table along with the men? What are those conversations that are happening at home, and what are the spaces that we are being invited into?
Yeah, I mean,
So
the math anxiety Math anxiety is real. And I would actually argue that doesn't discriminate between boys and girls either. I think just math anxiety in general is a huge thing for a lot of kids. And even there's reading anxiety, right? There's so much anxiety that gets built up into certain subjects for kids at certain ages that just sort of stunts them into moving forward and in school with confidence. So We've talked a lot about education. Let's talk about companies. And basically, what can a company benefit from if their employees are more financially literate, if there's more financial education out there? Is there a way that corporate America benefits from this going forward, maybe from the younger generations? So let's say 15 years down the road, if we all had it our way, if both of these organizations end up educating all of the people that you want to educate, how does corporate America benefit from that?
I think one of the benefits is taking so I think about government assistance programs. There are people who truly fall on hard times, and I believe that they should have access to those programs. But I believe that we could potentially, if there was more financial education that was available to the masses, including those in underserved communities, I do think the amount of assistance that we are currently distributing would decrease, and we could use those for other areas towards economic development. Again, still have some for available because life happens to everyone. But I think even in instances like that, we could see a decrease if we were able to empower them in other areas. Student loan debt, I think, would potentially decrease if we were able to have, again, those holistic conversations about what does post-secondary education look like, not getting too much student loan debt that you cannot afford to truly pay back. Those are just two things that come top of mind on how I think it could actually have an economic benefit if we were able to get this information to kids as early as possible.
And I would just add, having finance is important to every business. So every business has some type of role, and making sure that we have those that are educated, that are participating in those conversations, it helps the corporations. Also, if we are broadening the talent pipeline, which we do see, having different voices in the room, having that broadened talent pool means that there's more that is available for corporate America to be hiring in, right? So any opportunity where we are bringing more people that would be knowledgeable to be at the table in those financial conversations, and any opportunity where we're broadening is helping the industry and helping corporate America.
Yeah, you mentioned student loan debt. Obviously, SoFi has a student loan business. But one of the things that I think would help people, especially when you're in college, you don't quite have a grasp yet on what that means, right? All you need in that moment, you're very focused on the moment. You need to pay your tuition, you need to buy your books, you need to pay your rent or pay for housing, and you need to maybe have a little left over for whatever else is going on in your life. And student loans give you the money to do that. And you don't have this realistic expectation of, okay, when I get out of school, you have this sort of idea that, okay, I make $0 today, right? So when I get out of school, if I'm going to make $60,000, it sounds like so much. Mm-hmm. And it's not. Right? It ends up not being very much when you get out of school and you have to pay rent, buy groceries, make a car payment, and then you find out that your student loan payment is $800 a month, something like that. So, it's really shocking to some people. And I think if you can get out from underneath that sooner so that you're not spending the first 10 years of your career burdened by large amounts of debt and feeling like you're working paycheck to paycheck, you're living paycheck to paycheck because of it, you get more empowered, you get more confident, and you feel like you have more freedom. I think there's a lack of freedom in a lot of this because you end up coming out of school and realizing like, wait a minute, I got to pay taxes on this income that I'm, and it seems like it's going to be so much, and it ends up not being enough.
Someone said, I can't remember who it was, but they said you go to college to get a good job just to pay for college,
Yeah.
pay for college in this cycle. And so that's one of the things that we actually do, even in KidVestors, especially for our 11th and 12th grade students, is that we actually have an entire module on college preparation, which is actually part of the standards, the financial education standards. And so we call it like the ROI activity. Okay, determine, pick 3 to 4, career paths that you're considering. Start doing research. Start looking at the colleges that offer the degrees for those fields. How much will it cost you for those 4 years? Now look at your starting salary. How long will it take for you to, at least break even, essentially, making sure that, yes, student loans, we believe it does have this place because most people cannot afford to just pay for it outright, making sure you're not borrowing more than what you need. And I think the education component comes in because what we're seeing even at KidVestors is not only are we teaching these kids, the parents are learning right along with them. So they're learning about 529s to offset, those college expenses. And as the kids are learning about these programs, they're eventually going to become adults and have their families and have their kids. They're going to remember what they were taught. And so that's where the positive domino effect can start when you start teaching that information as early as possible so we can pay it forward.
There's so many that are first generation college bound that don't have that societal nor familial nor collegiate connection to look at that return on investment and to dive into that. So the curriculum that both of us have in regards to that piece is so critical because it's also, again, going back to what pieces do I think I am going to have to cover? And some of those expenses they'd never even thought of, nor have they had anyone else mention to them.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is, maybe I have a biased opinion. It's going to sound like a SoFi commercial, but you not only do you need the education, but you need the tools. And the tools, the reason that our program is set up the way it is because it's intended to follow somebody through the entire life cycle of their financial lives. So you might start with a student loan through the company, and that's the beginning. We also have credit cards. You need to build your credit. We also have banking products. You need to start saving. We have an investing platform. Once you've got some of those building blocks in place, and each one of them is very important to your financial life, it's a step along the way. And then we have the tools to help transition you into the next leg of it. And there's a number of companies that offer budgeting tools, but we also have something that shows you basically, here's how much you're spending on stuff every month. And are you on track? You can check in with yourself. Are you on track with your spending? Here's how much you owe. Here's what your rates are. All of it, right? You want to be able to track that. And if it's in front of your face every day, you can't ignore it. And I think that's maybe the beauty of doing this in today's day and age. All of it's at your fingertips. It's all on your phone. There's no excuse. There is no excuse to not know what's going on in your financial life because every single financial company that you work with has an app.
Correct.
And they will tell you what's going on in your financial life. So you have to be able to check it. And if you can find something that aggregates all of that so you can see your whole financial picture, because I understand how challenging it can be to have all these fragments all over the place and not really understand how the puzzle pieces fit together and what am I supposed to do about it? And to what we talked about earlier, all these different competing priorities, how do I bring them together into one? You have to also have the tools in order to stay organized in your own head.
And I think education will help build the confidence that even Ashley was talking about, because as you were talking, I was thinking about, especially underserved communities where 70% are either unbanked or underbanked. So even if we have those apps, if they don't actually have an account to help them track those things, it doesn't help them. And so, but that's where you were saying the financial education piece comes in, because we're educating them how, okay, checking, savings, investment accounts are helpful to you. You don't have to keep putting your money in the mattress or wherever have you in your home, but that these tools are available to you like a SoFi to help you become more financially literate so you can thrive. And so, yeah, I totally agree with what you were saying.
Absolutely. Creating those pathways.
Yeah. I'm curious your both of your thoughts on this, and this is sort of a new phenomenon that's going on, but we have a new administration in Washington, and there's been a trend of rolling back the DEI initiatives, and we've seen some larger companies start to take part in that. How do you feel about that in general? Is that going to stand in the way of some of the initiatives that you're trying to further?
It's very disheartening, seeing as though a lot of the DEI policies that were implemented in the first place was to help level the playing field. Again, I always talk about the racial wealth gap and how, particularly African Americans are projected to have a net worth of zero in less than 30 years now. And that's due to a lot of systemic injustices that I could go on and on about, from slavery to redlining to literal towns where, people were building wealth and have businesses, being burned down, to reference the Tulsa Massacre. And so that's contributed to the wealth gap. We all know how equity works. It's in compounding works. It's built over time. So if your businesses were burned down, or if your house was in an area where it was not appreciating, like another neighborhood, that affected your ability to build wealth. And that happens over a period of time. And some of those effects are still felt today. And so these policies were implemented to help level the playing field. When companies roll them back, they're not acknowledging why they were implemented in the first place. It was to have a fair and equal chance at having a thriving economic opportunity for everyone, regardless of their background. And so I am very disheartened by some of the rollbacks personally.
Okay. Ashley?
There is a, unlevel playing field in the sense that there is not the same access to professions, to the industry, to jobs. Social capital is huge and such an important part of any piece that you decide to go into. And those connections are not made equally across different groups, right? And so any opportunity that we have to level the playing field, to bring in those connections that maybe others don't have, to bring in the access that others don't have, then everyone comes together and benefits. Like, having more people participating in any piece allows for there to be a larger equation.
And to piggyback off of that, there's beauty in diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's beauty in having, diverse thoughts where everyone is not thinking the same, approaching finance the same. You see it in the workforce. It's beautiful. And so to say we don't want to embrace people who are different is not even the picture of America when you think about it. We thrive off of diversity, equity, and inclusion. People want to come to America for that reason. And so when you have those policies rolled back, what is that saying about our values as a country?
We've all heard how there's differences as far as investments and how it produces better returns by having different thoughts and different conversations that are happening.
Okay, so last question to both of you. If you could wave a magic wand, if you could abracadabra and change one thing about how we teach financial literacy today, what would it be? Courtney, I'll start with you.
Emphasize investing, but still keep a holistic perspective. Don't just talk about investing, but you don't talk about the fundamentals like budgeting. Don't talk about budgeting, but then you're not teaching people actually how to earn more money. Because some people, they don't really have a money management problem. They have an income problem. And so we need all aspects for this to work together beautifully. So that is something I harp on all the time. It cannot just be one component. We need it all.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely agree. Holistic approach is so important. You have to have the budgeting and the investing. And for the investing side, really making it to where it's something that's very relevant. So how can we present the concepts to where people understand it? Whatever group it is understands how it can be beneficial to them, how it can be beneficial to their families, and how it can make a difference to them even generationally.
Okay, so we're going to finish with what we call creative segments. These are really short answers. And Ashley, I'm going to start with you to answer this one. It's called The Word. In one word, what do you believe is the key to financial well-being?
Compounding.
I think we could have guessed that from the rest of your answers. Compounding is very important. Absolutely. Okay, next one is called the aha moment. Courtney, this is for you. What was the moment that you realized the power of financial literacy?
This one's personal. When we started KidVestors, I was working with a family. They didn't have any investment accounts at all. And so after working with this family, they had 2 young kids. They ended up, after working with us, they opened an account for each one of their kids, as well as for themselves. So a brokerage for each of them, mom and dad, as well as custodial brokerage for each of their kids, in addition to a 529. They said had they had not worked with us, they may have never even opened those accounts. And so those 2 kids' lives will be changed just by having the knowledge that, oh, this even exists. And so that was a light bulb moment for me to know, like, you can literally change people's lives just with having access to the information.
Yeah, you can make a difference. And there's a compounding effect of that too.
Yes,
because they will, just to bring it all home, they will tell other people that story. And that will compound, right? That story. You will tell other people that story. You just told a lot of people that story right here with a microphone in your face. That story will compound. And if it's only one other person that we affect on this podcast that says, oh, you know what? I should do that. And the people listening to this podcast, to be fair, are probably already investing. That's who our audience is. But maybe they hear it and they say, I should open one for my kid. Or, you know what? I've been not doing this 529 thing. I'm going to do it now. If that's all the difference we make today, great, right? It's just one little step at a time, and there's a lot of compounding power in that. Okay, last one. You both have to answer this. You can either give a best or a worst. You choose. We call it the best or worst trade. What's been the best or worst, I'll say, financial decision that you've made? Ashley, we can start with you.
The best financial decision that I made was actually transferring universities, because I enjoyed the university that I started with. And in the beginning of my sophomore year, I realized that I could complete my undergrad at this out-of-state public school, or I would have the same amount of money spent to get my grad degree at an in-state school. And so I transferred to an in-state school, which seemed like a very large life decision at the time, and made a really big difference as far as my student loans and other things.
That's great. Okay.
You did best, so I'm going to do the worst. Where do I start?
Thank you for balancing us.
Where do I start?
Yes.
Okay, so I would say the worst was, for me, when I spent my 401k. I didn't know. So I think about that money, like what it could be worth now had I had just rolled it over and let it to continue to grow. So I try not to think about it so I don't get depressed.
Do you torture yourself, take the number and then compound it over like what could have been?
I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But you don't know what you don't know.
You're right.
So that's why, we're doing what we do.
Yep. And you learn that lesson the hard way. It's the same as with investing. And I don't want to send the message to people out there, if you haven't started investing and you're just getting started, it's not always a positive experience. You are going to buy stuff that goes down, and that's going to be a painful experience. But you also are going to have the opportunity for compounding over time and averaging those returns over time. Everybody makes bad decisions sometimes. It's not even a bad decision necessarily. It's just that you don't have a crystal ball. You can't see the future. So you might really believe in a certain investment that doesn't do what you want it to do. And that can be really frustrating. But likewise, it's a learning opportunity. And you watch one thing go down. And I mean, I've had these and I've been investing for a long time. This is my job. I've had moments where I invest in something and I'm like, what was my thesis on that? Where was I, right? Like, where was I going? Did I let myself get talked into something that I shouldn't have let myself get talked into? And sometimes the answer to that is yes, that I let myself get too skewed by my own emotion about something or my own feeling in that moment, or I got wrapped up in the environment and I had a little bit of FOMO or whatever it is. So we all fall victim to that. So don't beat yourself up over it too much. It's over. It's in the past. You'll never do it again. All right. Ladies, thank you both so much for joining me, and thank you for telling your stories and talking about your organizations. Thank you again for submitting to SoFi's program, and congratulations on being two of the winners in SoFi's program. We are so happy to have you as speakers to this. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
All right, some big takeaways from that episode. I'll start with something that Courtney said about teaching kids the value of money early. So starting with wants versus needs and understanding how to spend that money on things that they're trying to prioritize. She used a phrase, model what you mimic. And I loved that. And an example of it was to include kids in conversations with your partner or with other adults in your lives about money, to give them that model of how it works. Secondly, this was more of a takeaway from Ashley, but it's important for young women to see finance as a career option and see it modeled for them, see other women in finance. And she talked about STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and math, and the M in STEM being math, and just focusing on that so that they have models of not only teachers that are in those roles, but financial professionals that are in those roles so they can look up to and grow into it. I thought that was a great takeaway as well. And then lastly, they both agreed on this one, and I agree wholeheartedly. We have to take a holistic approach to financial literacy. So if you're going to teach investing, you also have to teach budgeting. If you're going to teach budgeting, you also have to teach how to earn more income, because they all feed into each other. And if you have this piecemeal approach of people just learning about investing, or just providing education about budgeting, or just providing education about job searches and climbing a ladder, or whatever the case may be, you need to be able to tie them all together and really enrich somebody's entire financial life. I thought that was an amazing episode. I'm so proud of both of them. I am still so proud of the program that we did through SoFi last year. And I am so excited to have everybody hear the great takeaways from both of those winners. So thank you again for listening, and we will bring you the next episode very soon. For more from me, read my weekly column every Thursday on the SoFi blog, or follow me on X at Liz Thomas Strat. Follow The Important Part wherever you get your podcasts. The Important Part is produced by SoFi in partnership with Pod People.
The views expressed do not necessarily reflect the institutional views of SoFi or its affiliates. This program should not be copied, distributed, published, or reproduced in whole or in part, or disclosed by any recipient to any other person without the express written consent of SoFi. Each name of any organization mentioned in this program is the property of the company to which it relates. It is used here strictly for informational and identification purposes only, and is not used to imply any authority, ownership, or license rights between any such company and SoFi. The content of this program is not a recommendation from SoFi to you or any listener or recipient of this program, and is provided for informational purposes only. SoFi is not providing any financial, economic, legal, investment, accounting, or tax advice through this program, or to its recipient, and you and any person should not rely on this program for any advice. Investment decisions should be based on specific financial needs, goals, and risk appetite. SoFi has no obligation to provide updates or changes to the information in this program. Past performance of any investments mentioned does not guarantee future results, which may vary. Neither SoFi nor any of its affiliates makes any representation or warranty, express or implied, as to the accuracy or completeness of the statements or any information contained in this program. Any liability for any statements in this program is expressly disclaimed by SoFi. For additional disclosures related to the SoFi Invest platforms described above, please visit sofi.com/legal.